There's a lot of familiar faces in the room, and some which are new to me, so my apologies. I've seen a lot of people over the years. If I don't quite remember your name, my apologies for that up front. I suppose you can categorize me as another overseas TD, but what you might not know is I actually played here in '83. I played for Manly for one season. And Australia, had a big influence on me, if I'm candid. I'd left Cardiff City a real damaged player, based on my experience as a young pro there. I hadn't been able to get myself out of the mire at Swansea and at Hull. And I came to Australia and the healing process started. And I've re-found my love for the game. And so I feel a little debt, if I'm honest, to the country. I feel a little bit invested. And I don't know why, but I do. How I sort of came back originally was I'd met Kelly Cross in Prague in 2006. And then when I took the role in New Zealand in 2007 as TD, after leaving the Welsh FA, Kelly asked me to come over and be involved in coach ed, and then eventually we rewrote the courses and I moved over. And so I have a little bit of a background and like to think maybe I have a little point of difference to previous TDs, and that's not any criticism. I mean, I hold Han, for instance, in the highest respect. But I have a little point of difference. But you'll find that I'm a fidget. I move around and stuff. I also like it interactive, so if you've got something to say, you've got an opinion, don't be afraid to express it. There's no stupid opinions. The questions are more important than the answers many times, so feel free to ask. I'm going to ask questions. Be prepared to challenge each other, but let's just keep it civilized, if we can. So we can sort it out in the car park after. Just in terms of the health of the game, how do you think the health of Australian football is at the minute? We're going through, we've got some symptoms, there's some changes. Could be growing pains, separation, second tier discussions, NPL review, training compensation, etc. So we could be on the verge of a massive growth spurt. Could be the window of opportunity to really move forward. On the other hand, our under 15s can't beat Malaysia. So it could be the symptom of something else. And so, there's some facts that we need to consider, some realities we need to look at. Patience in our hands. So I'd suggest a forward-looking, forward-thinking mentality. Have to put the past well behind. So, using a football analogy, we're trying to get someone or something into a goal-scoring position. That's what we're trying to do. Where do we want the game to be? Not in 4 years or 1 year, but in 20 years. And again, I have a little bit of a criticism that our strategies are 4-year cycles, which is ridiculously short. They should be much longer. It takes a long time for change to bed in and take place. We judge things far too quickly. So if something gets introduced this year, the 17s don't qualify, it's crap, rubbish. It takes a long time. We need a long-term view. So alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. And I would say we need to go from that to that, and we could surprise the world. So, little question. Speak to someone you don't necessarily know because you're in your pairs, you're in your teams, but even if you do, why are you involved in football? Just off you go. Feel free. I won't necessarily ask you to share your, otherwise we'll be here till about 3 o'clock, but it might be some of these things. You're here because you really want to help players. Often the coaching start. Often why administrators get into the game. They had an experience and they want to make it better for someone else. Make the game better. I just love it. Just want to be immersed in it. It's my job. Oops, I'm in the wrong meeting, in which case the door's over there. But it's my job in the sense that can be a difficult one. Because sometimes you have to keep your job. And therefore you have to do things that you don't always believe in. Luckily, I'm in a situation where I don't care. I don't care if I get sacked because I don't toe the line. I don't care. It's these things. End of. So I'm going to be a pain in the ass or I'm going to be a guiding light. Either way, it's going to be good times, bad times. I don't care. But I trust we're all in this space, yes or no? Trust we're there for the good of the game. So what does that mean? What does good of the game actually mean? I've heard it in a number of reviews in my time down in Victoria. It would be good for the game. So some thoughts around this, well, better and more. So we've got targets to get more kids involved in the game, but we need targets to make sure we retain them. Otherwise, it's a churn factor. Just get them in and they drop out. And the question mark is why? Because something fundamental down at that starting point is the fundamental start for the rest. And if we get it wrong, it's wrong all the way. And then from more comes better if you've got the right environment. So maybe we need more alignment, and this is why it's a great opportunity to get stakeholders in the room with maybe different perspectives, different viewpoints. It's always that sort of empathy is a key thing. So in my experience, I'm in club space, I've got no empathy for the association. I'm in the association space, got no empathy for the federation, and works down the line as well. It's typical. Empathy is the biggest factor. Opportunity. Opportunities for everyone to grow, for the game as a whole, but for your part of the game to grow, but not at the expense of the game. And therefore support and cooperation. And fundamentally then, players, coaches, facilities are a factor. But again, are there facilities sitting there in schools and the like, which with a bit of a different mindset we could tap into? And then funding. Big issue. Unfortunately, we start here. Start with the football and then work out how to make it happen. So the better competitions, better clubs, better coaches, better players. So historically, I mean, I'll go back to the foundation of the game, so 1860 something, various versions of football, which are now rugby, AFL, league, and soccer, were still being played under one banner of football, different rules and versions all over the country. An association was formed to guide one set of rules, and that became association football. And their job was this. That's all it was about. No national teams, competitions, the start of it all. So fundamentally, national teams came in about 1872, ironically pro football in about 1895. So our role is competitions and national teams. In the 50s, I was just talking to Peter here earlier, maybe in the 70s here, coach development started. Then player development started, because previous to that, clubs just went, yeah, you're all right, you, contract, whatever, join us at a certain age, because the mass was there. So player development started, because all of a sudden that had stopped. And then eventually, 2000s in Europe, through the European club license, club development started. But you need to flick that round. Because what's happened in every association I worked in is the development's been done by the national body and the associations, and they're reluctant to hand it over. So we need to start empowering our clubs, provide the competition, empower the clubs. That doesn't mean off you go, guys and girls. It means working with clubs to build their capacity, and then that'll enable our better coaches to work, and then we'll get better players and we'll keep players. So there's a decent quote here. It's the small tasks, the component bits in this room, in unison, going in the same direction, will make the big difference. It's no different than the team on the pitch. You spend 88 minutes off the ball. You make the biggest difference off the ball. Same here. So, some fundamental questions, just in terms of the whole perspective, because there is this danger, and I will move into it, that we only think of talented players. Let's look at the whole game. So what's a player? Well, it's anyone, really. We've got junior, youth, senior. What's football? Well, we tried to articulate this. So we had a meeting with the TDs in-house, in FFA, TDs, and described football, the pillars in football, and we came up with a number of versions. And so we tried to synthesize it down into something where you could say, well, there's social football, there's the participation base, maybe moving into performance, and there's high performance. And then we looked at some of the principles maybe, and whether you agree or not, we can refine them. This is a whole debate. It's not a given. This isn't it. That's the point of discussion. So what are the principles that define each pillar? Because that hopefully is a bit of a guide about what pillar should provide. So something like, in the social pillar, it's pretty much the same. Just play. I just want to play. So there's a few ladies and gentlemen, certainly a few gentlemen in the room who are certainly my generation. That's all we did. We just played. It's fun. It was active. It was social. It was with your mates. There was learning, but no one was teaching. And it was cost-friendly because we didn't have to pay. You just got on the park. But this is a fundamental. So whatever we do in this space, and do we do anything in the youth space just for social football? Probably not. Private providers occupy this space. It's an opportunity for clubs and the game to occupy that space. There's a revenue stream. There's a potential of people migrating this way and that way, but you keep them in the tent. And in Europe, this is, if you like, their now biggest challenge. The game has shrunk or stabilized in this space. And with modern society, people don't want to train twice a week and sign up for the year. They don't. They just want to play. So beware, it's coming, and it's probably come. We need to get into it. With our juniors, so down here, I just play. I get a nice experience in a fun day or a camp or in my kickoff program, and I join here in this space. What do we do straight away? Teams or just play? Mostly teams. Off, you're there, you're there, you're there. It's too early, probably. How many do we dismiss out of the game simply because we make a judgment very early on in their taste of football? So we need to think in this space about how do you keep them in, because that's probably where your churn rate comes. And then as we work through the thing, so the developing spectrum goes along. Here you might have players 12 and under moving into a more organized program. And then in the pillars here, still the same thing. I'm playing, but now I play and train. Play and train in a programmed, if you like, the more intense time commitment is aspiring, and so on. And then in the high performance environment, it's full time. Pros, experts. It's a full-time professional environment. As we move back down, they're aspiring to that, but resources, it's not full-time. And we need to recognize where we sit in the pillar. So, timely thing, 50 years and all that. I'll pop a quote up. What should our moon mission be? Rhetorical question, but if we were saying we're going to the moon, what is it?
Win the World Cup.
Yeah, good answer. Win the World Cup. Why not? There's some reality checks, but the fact is no one had ever been there. In fact, no one had ever been in space at the point of that statement. So again, the better equals more from the more. If we get our structures right, if we all work together, we get better. So what is better? And this is, now we'll have a debate. So does international success matter? Yes?
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, it's an unequivocal. Why?
Best culture to kids.
In what way?
It can influence the culture, particularly for people who aren't involved or don't have good exposure to our game.
Okay, so it puts the game in a different light on the national perspective. Yeah, okay. Yeah, gives you a profile. Okay, so there was something over here. Creates what?
Great player base.
Yeah, why? It's inspiring, isn't it?
Right.
It's inspiring. There's, you know, you get pinnacle events. I'm sure post 2000 Olympics, there was an uptake of whatever, especially 400 meter running or something with Kathy Freeman. Something will be, all of a sudden people want to do that. It's absolute. What other things? So your profile goes up, people are inspired. There's a whole load of spin-offs, revenue, sponsorship, all the other stuff which helps fuel the game. It does matter. So what is international success? So the Matildas have got the quarterfinals, winning it. Well, some reality checks that we need to think about. Socceroos have made the round of 16 once, winning the World Cup. So in the men's game since 1930, 8 teams have won it. 19 have come in the top 3. In the women's space since 91, 4 teams have won it. Only 7 have ever made the semi-finals. It's not to say you can't, but let's be a little bit realistic, because you're talking about nations who have won it, who've got deep divisions of football, a culture where it's on the back page and the front page, not the 15th page from the back, because there's a second-rate AFL game somewhere. So, but if you start getting into these stages, anything can happen. Round of 16, the league game, whatever, it all gets very close. So you can do it. So what are the critical factors that contribute to those type of things? What do you think the critical factors are?
Development of players.
Yep, it's a fundamental. Absolute fundamental.
Development of coaches.
Yes, absolutely.
Performance at the underlying levels.
Yeah, the whole ecosystem is massively, massively important. Well, there's a few. Quality international competition is something. So there's the Oceania days and the current days. It's harder to get there, but you get tested better on the way. It's something you should embrace, not resist. And also with your age group teams, you know, people will say, oh, great things are happening in New Zealand because one player has transitioned to Bayern Munich. I can say honestly, and I know James is in the room, he comes from New Zealand as well, honestly say it's a freak. There are loads of gaps in what they're doing, loads. There's a couple of good players because there's a couple of good things happening. They could be a lot better. So we've got to be careful that you look across and say, oh, you know, someone gets signed by Bayern Munich, they must be doing great things. There's always the outlier who gets picked up. So quality international competition, and on top of that, regular international competition at every age group. So currently, it's cyclical. You go in the qualifiers for the 15s, then we'll have a program for the 16s and 17s. They should be running 15s, 16s, 17s, 19s, 20s every year, regardless of the cycle. You put in people, girls and boys, on the conveyor belt, giving them an experience and hopefully transitioning them through, and we'll talk about what that looks like. Domestic professional football is a must, an absolute must. All the research suggests that if you can accrue, so it's 95%, I think, of the world's players in the top leagues accrued 75 games between 17 and 21 in a lower professional league. It's a must. You've got it on your doorstep. Don't think it's better shipping them off overseas, because history says they come back. The outlier doesn't, the most do. But if you do it right, then they'll transition over and potentially stay. So you have an asset. World-class youth development, so it's not just about youth development, although across the whole spectrum, broadening it from any development to world-class, it all plays its role. And to the point Stuart made, broad base is essential. More logs on the fire, hotter the flames. So that would be the one. Question mark. What would be an indicator of world-class youth development? Well, the number of players in the top 10 leagues. And this applies both genders, by the way. So currently the Matildas are in not a bad space. There's a real danger, and it happened in New Zealand with the 2006-20s generation, which is predominantly the team that's been in the picture since, that there was all these other players coming through. It wasn't, it was a freak. It might have been the golden generation, who knows? Don't assume that there's all these players coming through. We need to make sure they are coming through. And we need to test it, and we need to invest in it to make sure that as this relatively young team ages, it doesn't just fall off the end. So this group were able to push out older players. Who are the younger players able to push out younger players? That should be the challenge. Top professional football. So in the world's other leagues, if you like, better leagues than the A-League. And that's a difficult one to do, and then in domestic professional football. So just some data out of the round of 16 for the Men's World Cup. So if you look at the teams that qualified and their constitution of players in top leagues. So the top 5 leagues were EPL, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, and French League. And these top 5 clubs are the clubs who were consistently in the top 10 over a 10-year period. So not just randomly the team I support or don't support. Next 5 included Belgium, Dutch, Portuguese, 2 South American leagues which are ranked in FIFA, and the Championship. And so that's where obviously some of those constituents. So basically, whole squad playing in somewhere in the top leagues here. So the numbers here compared against those. So 20 out of the 23 in the top, et cetera, et cetera. And then you look down here now, Japan, the other players, the remaining players would be playing in the J League, which is a decent league. And we come down to this. And then if you look at the comparisons, and again, what I say about the Matildas, we need to look at the development backgrounds they had. So a lot of them played informally with boys, etc., family support, their pathways to pro football, the changing scene that might happen. So the women's game is rapidly emerging elsewhere in the world. There are better leagues over there. At what stage will your Matildas not come back and play in the W League? Because it's coming. Economically, I don't make money here, I make it there. So we need to be real about how that league works and how we make sure we get as many as we can there. Because if you do, you've got a better chance of winning a tournament. Something the PFA put together, which I think is very enlightening. So in the period of the round of 16, that was the depth of Australians playing in the Big 5. So that's English football. This is German football, so we're getting a little spike in that, which is good. But there's a decline. Massive decline. It's a reality check. In that period, maybe the game's changed as well. I mean, there's obviously some ex-players from that period here, but you know, what might have been, and I certainly know in the 90s in the UK, we were talking about bigger, faster, stronger. But the reality is we got it slightly wrong, because it's not just about athletes, it's about decision makers. And the game's got faster, and you need to be able to react quicker in that game. We make good decisions. So there's a problem, and we need to recognize. And the game's got faster, and you need to be able to react quicker in that game. We make good decisions. So there's a problem, and we need to recognize. So looking at the club vision and looking at competition, maybe as a couple of thoughts. So club, you know, they have a clear purpose. There's an intent to do things. So something like, I did some work with Everton at one stage, and I can remember being in the club, and they said something like, oh, we've got 49 of our players playing today. And you go, wow. Yeah, only one in our first team. But there's 48 across the whole league. Juve produce a lot of players, but not for Juventus, ironically. They're in other clubs. So there's a strong correlation that they want to produce good people and good players, appropriate exit routes. So again, in the academy system in the UK now, the US collegiate is looking as an exit route. So you're not making it as a footballer, but you can get a place there, get a scholarship, off you go, get your education. You might come back through the MLS, you might not, but actually, in my day, when you left the club at 18, you'd already left school at 16, and that was it. You didn't have an education or a formal one. So whatever it is, it's a clear vision. And it's a test. So do we want to go and buy a second-rate striker when we got a promising one here? Yeah, might do it short-term for a year while we bed them in and then they're gone. So again, the Everton one was really interesting. They had a decent-sized technical room and there was whiteboards all the way round. Had the year on top, so this current year and maybe 10 years hence. And you'd have the first team listed and all the youth teams. And the names of the youth team would appear on the first team board going around the room based on their predicted maturation. And first team players would come off. And so you'd look there, the legacy plan didn't always come to fruition, but that was the intent. So do we have one for our national team? Don't think so. Every cycle is like, who we got at the lower levels? We should know. We should know who our predicted players coming through are. We should have the protection mechanism, the constant dialogue of there's one. We need to keep them in the system. And it's something you live by, sorry. And then the competition's tough. So it's, the objective is you need to be exposed and challenged. That's why, really, sometimes there's a bit of over-regulation. If we've got our clubs in the right space and they know what they're doing, they're playing players up or even players down for the right reasons. It's not to win the game, it's the best vehicle for that player's progress. You've got a problem, of course. Parents don't see it like that. Other clubs don't see it like that. That's the problem. But that's what it should be. You get some people, and we'll touch on this later, you know, their maturation rate, their emotional state means they would be better staying down and getting a chance to grow as a person before they step up. Others, they're ready to step up, but now and again you need to pull them back just to give them a boost. It's a whole art. And it's in the national interest. It's in the players' interest first, but it helps nationally. So we get into the real nitty-gritty of youth development. Winning versus development. So, because has anyone ever played any sport and not tried to win? I think I'll go out there and get hammered today. Can't wait. Don't be ridiculous. Everyone's trying to win. It's just the emphasis on it. And we'll have all witnessed the worst practice possible from adults in that environment. How many of you actually did just play street football? Yeah. What happened when the score went 4 up? Change teams. Boring. Move them round. Oh no, we want it 11-0. Let's crush them. Get those 6-year-olds. Let them know how crap they are. It's a fact. Sorry. Your presidents might be, did the 8s win today? No. Not good enough. Sorry, it's bollocks. Absolute tosh. There's no indicator whatsoever about youth development. Best with best. I've heard it when I was in the Victorian framework, always used best with best. What's it mean? How do you judge it? Oh, we'll look at the results over the last 3 years. Oh, good indicator? It is easy to win in age group football. Just pick the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. Easy. Dead easy. It's not the measure of any quality youth development. The quality is other factors, and we'll touch on that. But if you look at the relative age effect, so this is data out of the Premier League. So the UK birth rate, and we're using that one, it's pretty even. Pretty even. There's no spike in the year. England squad, senior squad, pretty even. Premier League, little discrepancy, a little bit in the higher quarter than the lower quarter, but it's not far off. English academies, whack, whack. 45%, and this is with so it's on the school year, not year of birth. This is the beginning of the cycle, relative age effect. So they're looking at different things, maybe the wrong things. Ironically, if you take that conundrum there back to that, who's the most successful group? Please. So what have these got, or what happens here that's different from there? So it's called the underdog theory. So if you look at this, so in the latter part of the year, so it's September the 1st, out of the foundation phase, there's only 8.46, but they progress through. So it's a slower rate. Only 10% of that is made up, that pillar. These are the boys who are 15 and over. 10%. And yet, that 10% achieve more than the 25%. Why do you think that is? What are the type of things that might be in here?
They learn to play the game without the benefit of pace or power.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So park that one because we'll talk about it.
Resilient.
They're resilient. They're challenged, potentially. And remember, they're not all small. I was born 21st of August. I was my height at 14. So you're not always late maturers. You're not only late maturers, but emotionally, I struggled in school, given a year away. I couldn't read and write until I was about 20, but there you go. But it's an irony. So challenge is one. So the conversely then,
Is it the way the seasons are as well?
well, this is the...
They're fighting against kids that are potentially, because the season goes from September.
Yeah, it does. So these are the last quarter. So if this was our data, that'd be January to...
So they're fighting against
Yeah.
kids that they're 9 months older.
Yeah, they're conceding every aspect potentially. Maybe physical, certainly maybe emotional. They have to come up with other solutions. Yeah, have to come up with other solutions. Have to find other ways. Which then leads you to think, well, actually, what if these had that level of potential as well? These have been neglected, not being challenged, not being pushed. Because they must have had something, or maybe the ID's flawed. So the best with best. So let's have a look at development. So it's a period of growth. And then if you look back at the thing I showed you earlier, so a couple of steps that we've obviously got the phases, discovery, SAP, game training, performance. But there's this sort of novice to developing step, and then the emerging to aspiring step. And then we're talking about the whole game here, how important the whole infrastructure is. First steps to excellence. Hidden advantage, extraordinary opportunities, well, cultural legacies. So, the type of things that sit in there. You might come from a family with a football tradition, where all of a sudden the sport becomes the main cultural focus because of a big success. You have an opportunity, and actually the opportunity is unique in a sense. So I think both Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, both got access to mainframe computers when they were in their teens. Oh, extraordinary opportunity. There's the table tennis stories, but these can be simple ones. Hidden advantages, like what?
Could be the youngest.
Sorry?
Could be the youngest of 10.
Yeah, Could be the youngest of 10. Therefore, we got 5-a-side every lunchtime. Yeah. Yeah, they did some research, I think it might have been post-Sydney or post-Athens, and found the Olympic champions were predominantly not the older sibling. They were a younger sibling. So it goes back to that underdog theory a little bit, is someone else is driving you on. So these are key things. But in our environment, so one of the extraordinary opportunities we give kids is give them long enough to find their way. So they need opportunity. So yeah, we definitely give them opportunity, supportive and stimulating environment. And this is what you're driving at here. Big factor, no fear. What are your parents, in all honesty, you watch loads of games, I'm sure, and the various spectators. What are the spectators like? And so what they're all about, don't pass it to Freddie, don't do this, whack it down the pitch, whatever the case would be. Yeah. So we used to do an exercise in Wales on our junior leaders course where we might have 20. We'd pair you off. Alex would play, but you'd be the spectator. And all you do is shout at Alex. Every time you touch the ball, that's crap, you're rubbish, blah, 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 blah. There'd be a fight, everyone. Every time there'd be, oh, you can't say that to me. And you go, how does a 6-year-old feel then? And it should be part of the parent thing. You take the parents away, it never happens. In the Centre of Excellence Football in Wales, we never had a referee. Kids used to ref it themselves. Parents were up in arms to start with. But then the players would go, yeah, offside, put the ball down, your throw. If someone scored, they might go, great finish, but offside. They didn't care. And then there's a whole range of emotional discipline. Because they're starting to control their emotions in those environments and focus on the game and not blame someone and get distracted for 20 minutes. But these are massive factors. And this bit here, intrinsic motivation, is predominantly, I wouldn't say only, because there will be young people who are the golden ticket for their family. But that's why people make it to the top. That's why people stay in the game. That's probably why there was a spark in your life in this game while you're sitting here. Something happened that's kept you involved or got you involved. We've got to keep the fire burning. So what are the type of things we might need to do and look at to make that happen in the youth development space across the whole spectrum?
Got to make sure we push players up to a level that can grow them. So those ones who the first quarter, if a bunch of those that played at the time when they were dominating, maybe they would have been better forwards by the time they came in.
Okay, so more of an individual focus, without any shadow of a doubt. Challenge with that is certainly, sorry?
The competitions are a challenge with that.
Yeah, they are. The rules and regs. Yeah, they're age-based. And that's, again, and we'll talk a little bit about expertise that it gives the organisers, because there's health issues in that, there's maybe well-being issues. But we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's one. The challenge, of course, is because of a team's culture, you'll get someone saying, well, why isn't my son being put up? And that's an education piece, and actually saying to parents, well, it's not necessarily the best thing for them. So again, just in the time of the victory, this was a common one, and we said the only team you've got to worry about is the first team. You should be asking me why I'm not in the first team. Well, he's only 13, exactly. Shut up then. So we need to get in that space where we drive those things. The other thing is, let them play. Don't be too hurried to give them feedback. Because generally, when do we do it? Every time they make a mistake. Let them play, let them work out. We've all been in that space where you work out, Alex is a better tackler than me, I'm not going near him. I'll pass it before then. You work it out. Let them give them a chance. So the whole thing of keeping them in the game, let them play, is an education piece. And probably in the modern era, we need to educate our parents.
Yeah. I think
But-
that's the biggest
yeah.
thing. We're scared to.
Yeah, we are. Because they're customers. Customers always right. Sorry, they don't know. they're not right. Player first. Doesn't mean you have to be bullish about it, but we need to educate them. Then you move into the emerging, aspiring. And in this sense, the novice developing isn't just a 6 to 12-year-old. You could have a 14-year-old who's still in that space. But this is predominantly around those 12 pluses. And you will have seen this before. We do the one where, wow, what a player. But of course, we don't know their training history and their background. And that may be one of the problems with that other group is, oh, they're the finished article. No, they're not. We don't work enough to actually make the depth they've already got come to the fore. Don't challenge them enough. Don't give them enough individual focus. And so these are the big challenges, the bio and you've got obviously ironically got this coming up now. So how familiar are you with bio versus chronological? So chronological is obviously the year and date of birth. Bio? So it's your true age, if you like. It's your development age. So not only in your physical maturation, but your emotional state and things of that nature. Physical is something, though, that is a big factor because it impacts on potential versus performance. So the underdog, if you like, probably gets picked because of this potential. So what are potential indicators? Well, they're mostly mindset and decision making. So there's something about the character of the player, something about their confidence, their communication, their level of commitment, those factors that make people go, ooh, maybe decision making. So you might see, and often the case, and they get grossly overlooked, is you see someone position and time a movement, but the ball doesn't come because the other player can't see him. So more importantly, look at the players off the ball than on it. Because they're the ones who are often making very good decisions, but because of maybe, and even in every team, you might have a little hierarchy where they pass to their mates more than they pass to the player who's in the best position. We need to look at that, spot it, nurture it. Performance is often these things. It's my genetics and my maturation rate put me in a position of advantage. And I can execute, I can win the race. He scores 40 goals because he's more stronger, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's not to say they're not massive benefits. They are. But if we don't develop those, and those are harder to develop, then they fall by the wayside. And you end up with this situation. So you have early dominance from here, and you have late dominance. And these are the ones that represent that 10%. So how we look and how much time we give them is a factor. So youth development starts straight away. Starts the first time someone comes into the environment. That experience either keeps them in or they go, not for me. Once they're in, far too soon do we start thinking about these things. Almost straight away, teams. Who's making that decision in most clubs? You say coach, mum and dad, volunteer, someone who maybe doesn't really know. There'll be some who do, don't get me wrong, and I'm not belittling any people in the voluntary sector. But all I'm saying is there'll be people who basically can't see potential. They're rafting them straight away. It could be based on their mates, on their already social group. Just keep them in as long as we can, and then you'll start to see which ones fall into show performance and potential indicators. It's time. So it's about recruit potential, not performance. So, best with best. Best players in the best environments. Question mark. How do we know? So I will say, and these are the ones that represent that 10%. So how we look and how much time we give them is a factor. So youth development starts straight away. Starts the first time someone comes into the environment. That experience either keeps them in or they go, not for me. Once they're in, far too soon do we start thinking about these things. Almost straight away, teams. Who's making that decision in most clubs? You say coach, mum and dad, volunteer, someone who maybe doesn't really know. There'll be some who do, don't get me wrong, and I'm not belittling any people in the voluntary sector. But all I'm saying is there'll be people who basically can't see potential. They're rafting them straight away. It could be based on their mates, on their already social group. Just keep them in as long as we can, and then you'll start to see which ones fall into show performance and potential indicators. It's time. So it's about recruit potential, not performance. So, best with best. Best players in the best environments. Question mark. Academy is the most abused word in the football landscape in both countries. Everyone's got one. So what is it? What constitutes a good environment? Well, we've seen the critical criteria from the ECA report. And so we're looking at applying, let's say, strict criteria. So this is often where people get annoyed and angry. So this is a development plan. It's not a tick box exercise. It's just a paper chase. So again, I'll give you an example, and Wales is not a bad example in the sense that it doesn't include Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, Newport, because they're in the English system. So they do this. Under the European Club Report, for Welsh amateur teams to play in Europe, you have to hold the European Club license. It means your head coach, we didn't realize this at the time, but when we introduced the pro license, it meant all those coaches had to have a pro license. So, hang on. That means in Cwmbran Town or Aberystwyth, all those big name clubs that you've all heard of, got to have a pro license. It also means they have to have an academy. Every coach has to have a minimum B license. And we got there in 5 years with amateurs. None of them are paid, except the first team coach. And it was about this. And the irony was, the clubs fell into two categories. Great, we've been waiting for years. And what the bloody hell are you making me do this for? Two categories. Ironically, the latter group, a few of those clubs were the best thing we ever did. Glad we bought into that. And you're like, yeah, I remember. Because they've got their players coming through. And they've built a whole network. They've built something really strong and lasting. And that was the irony of it. It's an amateur game still. Connors Key Nomads just got to the knockout stage. First time ever. TNS as well. First time two teams got to the knockout stage. To be fair, the New Saints are a pro club. They play their players, but they're not on the same level as a Div 2 club or a conference club. But they got there. That means, in the context of European football, if your club teams make the knockout stages and go through pre-qualifying, your association gets a lot more dollars. So Wales typically got £180,000 a year, or euros a year, grant from Europe. Germany gets 8 million euros because their teams go to the final stages. English FA get 12 million. Spanish FA get 10 million. So that knock-on effect of actually your club sides doing better in various competitions has a big effect. Imagine if it's our Australian national team going to the later stages, the payday that comes back, both from the competition. So it's about quality, and therefore you need to accredit it. We need to check the quality. And so you will have heard about the 4-star system. The issue, I put category there, is the National Club Development Platform is also star rated. How many of you, has that been, I don't know, I don't actually know if that's been launched yet. It's on the table. So basically every club can get themselves a category of functionality. It's a good measure to sort of see where and how you're working. But it's called the star rating. So with the academies, we don't want to add another star rating because people will get confused. So we've just for this time, the accreditation category. So Cat 4 is world's best practice. And so it's the AIS, I suppose, but instead of 1 team, it's 7. It's full-time staff. So that would be full-time academy director, head of football, whatever you want to say. Full-time physio, full-time sports scientist, full-time age group coaches at all ages. Full-time analyst, part-time assistant coaches perhaps, full-time education and welfare officer. So we're talking in the criteria that only the 4-star can recruit interstate. So we're not going to expose any young player to a shitty move, sorry about the language, where they can't be supported and they're dumped into an environment that doesn't help their well-being. We're going to make sure it sits in the space where they can do that. 3-star, part-time and full-time staff. So you'd have key staff that have to be full-time, but there might be a range of part-time, and there might be an ability to have dual roles. This, based on my personal knowledge, is about 1.8 to 2 million a year cost. Probably around 1 to 1.5. There is a thirst from some clubs to move to this. Good thing or bad thing? Good. Good thing. 4 times the AIS times 7. 7 age groups. So it's 28 age groups getting developed, across this whole spectrum. 7 age groups, 28 groups of players. Good thing, potentially. So, good thing. But of course, this is crucial. Because there could be a lot more of these. There's likely to be a few at the 3 and 4 and a host at the 2 and 1. These are crucial. And that's probably where that whole system is when we have to be going player first. Player going up. Benefits got to come back. Benefits can be through relationships, education, maybe finance. But that shouldn't be the dictating one that limits a player going up. You're not going to give us any money? You stay here, pal. And if you're charging for that, make sure you pay the parents back when you get the cash. So it's an opt-in system at the 1 and 2 star out of the pro game. There'll be a mandatory system in the pro game. So there'll have to be minimum 2. So this is where we're going to go. So you can choose to comply. So everyone, and it doesn't have to be based on your league, as long as you've got a pathway to senior football. Is anyone just in the community space here? Yeah? Your club could do it. Yeah, we fancy that, we'll do it. Not linked to the competition structure. It's been an unmitigated disaster, that has, because of compliance, because no one kicks you out the league. So choose. There's a benchmark. If you fancy what you do is good, great, prove it. We'll help you get there. Oops, beg your pardon. What have I done there? Yeah, sorry. So this is about a cooperation. Listen, I'm sounding bullying now. I can see by your faces like, oh shit, here we go. But it's about cooperation. Those who want to put their hand up, great. More the merrier. Those who get to the standard, more the merrier. Those who are in the tent, more the merrier. More is better. It can only benefit the game if everyone embraced it, happy days. Would it matter if there's 200 Category 1 academies that are operating at a good standard in New South Wales? Of course not. Be a game changer. If there's only 20, doesn't matter. 20 is better than none. And we can get away from, we do it better than them. Or we'll know. It'll be measured. And ultimately we'll know, because how many players progress up the pipeline and how many players go to top football. And in 10, 20 years' time, national team do well, but in whatever gender, we can all say we had a hand in that. But it's all, or I'm afraid, it's nothing. And that's the challenge, because historically, I'm afraid it hasn't been all. There's too much patch protection. So hopefully you get a situation where in your club, people can grow. And you might say, we're happy in this pillar. We're happy here. We don't want to be in that. There's actually nothing wrong with it. I think the vernacular is far too much about this. If you're a club that thrives very well in the participation space and you're happy being there, we should be going, well done, great. Because you're doing all of these things for the right reason. If your club wish to migrate that way, great. No issue at all. But if it doesn't, or if your players are exceeding your club's expectations or abilities, push them along the trail. Get them up the pipeline. Best environments, developing players in the right way. Any comments, any questions at this stage?
Rob, if you're talking about Category 1 to Category 4 academies, we obviously want to push the best to the best environment.
Yep.
There's going to be an onus on each individual category and the people within them categories to make sure they're open to push them players up.
Yeah.
Who's going to monitor that? Who's going to manage that? Whose job is it to do that?
Well, we'd probably look at how we incentivize the whole scheme. So ultimately, there is a capital benefit reference that people pull the plug. Obviously, migrating to senior football, even if that's the social pillar. So I'm playing in that space. How many are in the walking football space? Anyone? I bet you don't walk. But yeah, that's a result, isn't it? If you could keep people all the way through to that, it'd be fantastic. Obviously, then you get your semi-pro, your professional, top professional, world stage. And here, again, stepping stone to the foreign leagues is probably the domestic league. It should be the first port of call. We've got to make these allies, not the enemy, if they are the enemy. But they've got to be allies. In everything we do, player first. It's a tough one. We get it right, we get better, more, better. And so the big things for me are a shift, if you like, to club development. So this is stage one of a club development shift. It's something we can manage. So see the clubs who want to opt in on the youth development stage, along with the national club accreditation scheme that's coming. You've got clubs saying, we'd like to know where we sit and how we can improve. Fantastic. And through that, we'll have better opportunities for our coaches. But the irony is, if you build a network, you can drive all your development. So your top clubs can help build the coaching capacity of the lower clubs by providing more educational opportunities in the informal space. More access to see what best practice looks like. And then therefore player development down. So here's the challenges. And this is where we're all in this room. We'll all have a certain hat on. It's the ability to take that hat off and genuinely leave it off. And say, we need to align. And that's not a strength at the minute. Let's get through. It's not as good as it could be. We need to cooperate. That's every party. FFA better with the feds. Feds better with the associations. Clubs better with each other and with their associations and their feds. The whole network. We're all guilty. Not you, not me, we are all guilty. Self-interest, yeah. There's a few, but they're in the minority. Most people, 99.9, are doing it for all the right reasons. You need to shoot them down. Finance and cost is a barrier. No two ways about it. But if we invest it, what we get in the right way and look at that, could be better. Role clarity, hopefully you get some kind of synergy. If you've got a categorization, people can go, well, we know what we do. And there's a measurement in that. And then history, you know, sometimes we can't get away from the past. We used to be a great club. There's a key word. Used. Need to create a clear pathway. It is messy, I'm afraid. If I'm a parent, I think it's messy. Not Lionel, as in, not clear. We'll set the academy criteria. We won't be just a fait accompli, there you go. We will have proper debate. We'll do a roadshow on it. We'll get input from the clubs so you can see where the bar is. We want to make it a challenge, so the same as the underdog. Can't be one you just give it out. Can't be, here you go. But it's got to be something you can aspire to and get to, and then so forth and so forth.
Robert, that include genders?
Yes, yes. So we're looking at the 1 and 2 across both. At the minute, NTC will remain the focus for the high performance pathway for the girls, but in time that will definitely migrate club-wise. But at the minute, it's about volume. So if you ended up with 3 academies in Sydney, you've diluted the player pool, but it's the way to go eventually. There's an interesting story from NASA. I think it was Nixon went to NASA and he's introduced the staff and he walks along. How do you do? And he goes, what's your job? I'm putting a man on the moon. They're all in white coats, all look like scientists. He'd actually spoken to the janitor. That's what a moon mission's about. He's as important as the guy designing the rocket, as the guy flying the plane. If he kept the toilets clean, no one has a tummy upset, no one gets ill, no one misses the mission. Where do you want to be? Where do you sit? Good for the game? Player first? Wouldn't it be great seeing them win a World Cup? Doesn't matter which gender it is, it'll do the same job. Thing is, we've all got this vital role. All of us. And it should be a simple choice. Should. And I suppose this is the one, legacy. So the reality is, I'll be in an old people's home probably sucking on a straw if it ever happens. It'll never happen in your own time. That's one of the challenges for the chairman, board, CEOs. It won't be in your time. It'll be after your days. You'll sit hand on someone at this stage and later on it comes to fruition. It's way down the line that it happens. We need to be thinking of that. So what do we want the game or say about us now in 20 years' time? Thanks. Good.
Dave Mason from Manly United, and I also work in association spaces.
Yep.
On the administration side. I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned before and just get your opinion on it. The word academy is the most overused word in our sport, and it's in your presentation a few times. What do you think of an academy?
What do I think of?
What is an academy?
It's an institute of education. And in our context, football education and people education. And it's a high quality. So with someone, raised the question earlier, do I think full-time staff make a difference? Yes. How many send their kids to a part-time school?
Some of the kids attend.
Yeah. Big, 100%. I'd be in that bracket. But that's what I would say it'd be.
Rob, I'll run the country flag 7A is on with Football New South Wales.
Yeah.
And I'm from Albury. The national titles over the last 7 to 10 years have been downgraded and pretty much just a shadow of its former self. It has been an aspiration for country athletes, and it's been a target for country athletes to go to. I understand that the metropolitan kids have now got different pathways, but it has been a single cause of the deflation of country football, male and female. Do you have any plans to target that or work on that area?
Talked about this yesterday. So I think, if you put your sort of childhood hat on and you go, it's always great to go to something that seems to have some weight and experience. I think that, so it's valid. I think we need to discuss and define what it's for. So if it's actually an experiential event that encourages people to stay in the system, I think that has validity. If it's about talent ID and we're waiting for nationals, we're not talent IDing well enough. So the thing would be the connection with regional areas to the centre, making sure that we have the TSP elite games going where you're coming in more regularly and playing in those games and getting exposed across the whole spectrum would be a better way of talent ID. But then nationals still might have some validity of providing an experience in the tournament setting. The question always is, which is the better value? 4 experiences maybe in tournaments and X amount of weeks through the year against a block of 1, and you could probably, cost-wise, it's probably the same. So I think there's it shouldn't be based on just an opinion. We should look at that and have a proper debate around that and garner wider opinion, especially for those players who might fall into that bracket. Sort of a no answer there in a way, so apologies for that. Tony. Hi, Tony. How are you? Yeah.
Just a quick question for you. With our under 18, under 16s, 18s, and 20s, do you believe that we should have under 17s, 19s, and 21s? Because we're losing a lot of players when they don't make the cut for the next age groups of their age.
So why don't they make the cut?
Maybe not good enough. Maybe they're not ready.
Okay.
And we are pretty, obviously with the Australian team, sometimes we don't really do well in the 17s and 15s as you see now in Asia. The age group sometimes it can...
there's a debate on that. I'm not sure the age groups are that relevant. I think it's a case of the philosophy. So you say they're not ready. So what's the blocker? Is it your first team's full of old guys, or what's the blocker that doesn't allow the ones who are ready to migrate up and leave the space behind? So I don't know. I think that you'd have to look at a big spread of data to come up with the best vehicle. I think just me saying change the age groups. You'd need to know why.
Typical player here, you playing boy, youth league player, you probably play at a club, but school football, they probably go to 1 or 2 academies, TSP, so they're probably playing, there's 4 or 5 different coaches, messages. How would you compare that to say a kid who's at Bayern Munich, Tottenham, or some of that, would it only be one club, one message, one type of coach?
Yeah. So,
And you think that's a problem?
yeah, massive problem. So there's also a problem in terms of you're putting the player and the family under pressure to make choices. We need to demystify that. So my opinion would be if you're in a category 3, 2, 3 or 4, that's where your training takes place. In the school space, and this is a debate, we would hope that schools would support a talented athlete. They've got loads of assets that would help in terms of well-being, in terms of education, in terms of all those factors, and some of it in the physical and some of it in the football. So it shouldn't be too hard, especially in the state sector. Where it becomes more challenging is, you get a 35 grand school scholarship and they want you for the 10 games. I think sense prevails in that space where you go, look, that's a good education. So I think there's a quid pro quo, but we need to know the roles of the schools, roles of TSP. And I think TSP is a very valid program. It's a chance for a top-up. It's also a chance to do some solid ID. It's a chance to start looking at getting better with better and also exposing them to maybe the next level. So I think TSP is valid, and I would say at the category 1 and below, that's where the kids will come into TSP. TSP can be part of the elite games, which might be midweek games run throughout the year with the 2s, 3s and 4s.
I'll have another one if you don't mind. The current coaching structure.
As in?
Your thoughts on the community structure and the gap between community and the advanced coaching pathway? There is a big disparity between what happens in the 2-day course as against the 1-week course. Big gap where the community coaches finish at senior licence level and then the C licence starts.
I think it's again, it's fit for purpose. So in essence, at the community level, in truth, you've got a massive workforce that's transient in some respects. So they're in for a few years and then they move on. In essence, I actually think that we could have a more, so the approach is to more online learning, a broader spectrum of delivery, more relevant perhaps to the group you're dealing with. So that's the means of that. And then the C license is the assessment bit is just the bolt-on, so there's a bit more choice in that. And the C license is the entry to the B. So in essence, there is a change coming in that spectrum. I do think that the one-size-fits-all. So when we wrote the C license, there's a component currently that looks at skill acquisition phase, and there's a component that looks at senior football. I think the challenge there is the skill acquisition phase, there should be another level of expertise. So there should be a B license that focuses just on skill acquisition. There should be an A license on youth development. These are changes that are in process because there are gaps in the age-related development or knowledge base in the current structure.
Rob, Kevin Lester from Hills United. If you spent some time in New Zealand, so you've seen what the All Blacks, how that's structured with them actually going to schools and clubs and saying, we have a vision and philosophy to create more All Blacks, we want you to all play this certain way. Do you see a replication of that around the world in terms of football in certain nations? And should we be looking at something like that? I know we have the curriculum and the framework, but should we be supporting that more? Clubs that play a certain...
All Blacks is brand New Zealand. The way people comply is there's money in it. So the players are contracted to the Super 15. If you go overseas, you don't play for the All Blacks. So it's a very tight model, and it's a danger with it that in some respects, some of their better players might no longer be eligible. It'd be interesting to see what happens if they don't win or they get knocked out in the group stage of a World Cup, whether they go, oh, hang on, missing a trick. It's predominantly through schools. So the traditional base is in the schools, and they set up their academies for later development linked to the Super 15 clubs. My feeling is there is an advantage. The curriculum has definitely moved, I think, people towards a more focused development. So people are looking at the discovery phase, we're looking at skill acquisition. The danger I see is, and it is that it's got hoodwinked into, it's about the 1-4-3-3. Well, actually, that's just a good development tool. The philosophy is effective possession underpinned by, that's the philosophy, that can come out. I think if you have a philosophical starting point, which we do, then people should be allowed to be flexible in that. What you don't really want is, no, we're just direct football. Because that game's, you know, the old bash at Wimbledon, pick up the seconds type game is gone. So, but we do have an issue, and I raised this the other week. We don't look forward enough. So our centre halves look here and look there, look there, look there. The best pass is someone that puts into a goal scoring position. The best pass. So why wouldn't your goalkeeper do it if he could, or she could, straight away? So we need to revisit the interpretation of the curriculum. But I think we're in a good space like that. I don't know how you feel. Do you think the game has moved forward in some respects? I think it has. You're seeing younger players much more comfortable receiving a ball with someone quite close to them. The other counter argument would be, I don't think people realise it's a good thing to be marked tightly, because I control this person completely. So when we say find space, you're in space, it's just not here when you're marked. So there's those challenges.
Sharon is a Manly United. You talk about the missing module, if you like, we're in the skill acquisition phase, which is going to be included in the next level licence, or hopefully back in the C licence, if I'm honest, because there are so many coaches who are coaching in the skill acquisition phase, and they have to have a C licence, but there is nothing in the current, as far as I know, in the current C licence that helps coaches or gives coaches the tools to adequately teach technique and the technical requirements for players in the skill acquisition phase. So we're all coaching skill acquisition phase without the necessary tools to correct and coach those skills.
Mm-hmm. Probably is a missing part. There's a big danger, though, if you teach coaches technique, is they teach it like you taught them. So, as an example, you know, get into line with the ball, relax on impact, la-di-la. Next thing you know, it becomes taught teaching, and they actually bombard players instead of observing players and recognising what the fault is. So there is a conundrum in there. The other thing is, could that be distance learning, watching videos, learning what the technique is? It probably could. Don't need to do it on a course. You can cover that in video with descriptives.
But it's still not being done.
No, it's not. And there is a gap in that. So that's something that's been identified and would become a module potentially. There's also probably a missing bit about teaching pedagogy in that phase. So although there's a tasks, cues concept. So again, I will say, when we designed that, we did it based on what we thought was good practice. I've had two eminent forensic psychologists say it is best practice. It's the way the brain thinks. So rather than telling you what to do, you ask you to try something, and through a trial and error, you resolve it before it becomes global. The missing bit is the cue, and we need to actually help people find the cue. So the game tells you, you need to be able to read the game. So we need to teach people how to read the game. The irony is that, in a way, the best coaches for that are the ones who have a very good understanding of the whole game and don't sit in that space. So we need to make sure we don't overcomplicate it and give people the wrong tools. Carlos
from Football New South Wales. You touched on, made the comment before we lost to Malaysia. I suppose amongst our technical team, we talk about the role that we play in development in the youth space of those players, national teams. And historically, New South Wales has always provided the large majority of those players. Do you think do we have the right benchmarking tools at the moment across Asia, given that that's region that we're actually qualifying through? And if we do, how do we filter them back into the systems that we have to help with the development of our games?
So when you say benchmarking tools, such as what, the intensity of the game, or?
Well, whatever benchmark tools we have, because there's been a lot of talk that 10 years ago we'd come up against Thailand, Malaysia, Qatar, Bahrain, any of these Asian-based countries there, they'd be in fear of us. We're now seeing a transition in this way, and there's a lot of valid reasons for that. But we're no longer by these, we're pretty much on par. And we're seeing it more and more at that younger age. So benchmarking in terms of saying, okay, well, what is it that they're doing? And I don't know the specifics of what are the right or wrong benchmarks, but do we need to develop them? Do we need to?
Yeah. A lot of those nations, so Malaysia as an example, have a full-time AIS, basically. They've gone that route, and they're based in Kuala Lumpur, and they have a full-time program. Vietnam are the same. In essence, their game's not deep enough, if you like, to spread that out and have multiple academies running. So they're probably in a situation where 30 years ago here, where you could do that, pull them in. For me, it's a case of there's something in the youth development space where we're not developing, that we're not getting enough players coming through the system who are capable of playing at that level and actually going on beyond that level. I think there's a big danger in benchmarking youth development against national representation. The reality is you've got to pick a national team. So you can do nothing and still produce national team players. The thing is, so if you say that this 15s might not qualify, but ironically, you could get 4 players into top football from it. Is that success or not? It is. That's the irony of it. The quid pro quo is that you might have to take a short-term decision and play some players who get you a result because it's good for the game, but you can't exclude the ones who have the potential to play on. So an example in Wales would be Joe Allen. So Joe didn't play at 15 and 16. The selectors thought he would get smashed because he was this big. But he was still capable of playing against those players, but that was the thought. At 17, he's in Swansea's first team. Gareth Bale was the same, ironically, and this does stay in the room. Didn't play at 15. In his growth spurt, he was like Bambi on ice. Good decision maker. Gareth put on something like 20 kilos and 5 inches in a short space of time. Played international football at 16 years and something days. But he didn't make the 15s. But we knew about him. And there's the danger, I think, that we look at the 15s and go, oh, it's doom. Do we know who's coming through? I don't think we do. I certainly couldn't. Trevor might be able to say there's these players. But then it's Trevor's subjective opinion. And that's another danger. We shouldn't have national selection done by national coaches alone. First team, obviously, no issue. Age groups, no chance. Every one of us has a coach bias. So it needs to be a much more robust process. So the benchmarks in terms of what they're doing, we need to look at, so Aspire Qatar, for instance, well, the bottomless pit. Malaysia have got something full-time, Vietnam have. I think Cambodia have moved that way. So these are smaller nations who will maximize their resource. And one of the advantages they probably have is that there's a load of street football happening. So Oceania are doing the same. Fiji got a full-time academy. There's a number in there. So it's going to get tougher unless we raise the whole bar.
Andrew Morris from Association Space. Great presentation, addressed a lot of things. Moving forward, what are we going to see from the FFA in the next 24 months and how to implement some of these things and address them?
So time's obviously a bit precious. It's a bit late, if you like, or tight. We want to try and launch the academy system this year. So to be clear, it would come up, you would do an online audit to start with to see whether it's worth applying, to see whether you can meet some of the criteria. Then if you apply, There's some things to work out, but there'd be a fee attached to that because, in all honesty, we want to dissuade any charlatans from applying, if I'm candid. Otherwise, it's just too hard. Then the audit would take place through a year. So you have to prove you're doing it. It's not a paper exercise. It'll be physical visits, actually inspections on training, things of that nature. Subject to that, you would then get your license and you would start the process immediately again. So your license issued in October 2020, you apply in November, process carries on and on and on and on. There's a resource challenge. So we're obviously talking with our partners through the Federation because ultimately there'll be a big responsibility in that space around the category 1s. Centrally, we'll do 2 and above because it'll be less. We're looking at designing a portal so that a lot of the information can be stored in that context to get you to a starting point. And then obviously, it's the physical aspect. So my priority from my work is I'll be doing the 2s, 3s, and 4s. And I'll train the workforce to do that.
Just a question on the stars before 42. If you attain one of those stars, okay, what do you get for it? Is it like a trademark that people know that your club is doing things well? Or is there actually incentive in what you get back for it?
Yeah, those are things that need to be refined. So there's some concepts in there. So again, these are debates that you go on. So the first thing would be, and it's an open discussion that we're having with the federations, is some kind of assurance that you can stay in the competition structure at the best level because you're being benchmarked at providing a good quality of youth development. So promotion, relegation, and all of a sudden you shunt down a division is anti-development. So some kind of assurance around that would be one. A debate to have, but that would be good. Actually, if you're the idea being, again, the model that you'd have a feeder system, so you would sign an MOU with a higher bracket, say a 3 or 4. By that, you guarantee your compensation. It's locked in. And maybe then if clubs are outside the compensation, it's a case of, that's okay, just wait for the FIFA money then. So you don't want to be part of the party, that's fine. You'll still get your compensation, but only when the player goes abroad. Whereas you might have a benefit of a player moving from a 3 to 4 and there's training of transfer fee. And that would filter back down straight away. So those incentives are being developed in line with training compensation, transfer compensation, etc., as well as ensuring that we protect those who invest. And that'll be unpopular, guarantee it.
Sorry,
It's okay.
it's on silent, believe it or not.
Yeah, I do. It happened to me the other day.
Rob, you touched on the national titles. And I think someone asked a question around, you Steve, from a country perspective. So in your mind, what is if we haven't done talent identification by then, potentially you're waiting right until the end of the year to get the big for the kid. We've got TSP, but in your mind, what should the national titles be?
The only reason I would say it should be there is for the reason of it motivates people on the fringes. Apart from that, I'm not sure it has any purpose. But I understand the Australian federated bragging rights. So we understand that states want to beat states and things of that nature. I understand that. But the reality is it's very valid to the point made there, which was, that for some people, it's the reason they'll come to TSP and they'll stay in the program is the opportunity to do that. I don't think we can neglect that. But in terms of it being for talent ID, if you're waiting to the death, you're not doing it right. Stuart?
Rob, just from a club perspective, we talk about this quite regularly, and I don't think there is a silver bullet for it. However, even in your own words today, we speak about the question mark being placed around best versus best. What does that mean? We talk about the club the NPL youth club environment that at the moment has a structure. We've then overlaid a TSP environment, which is an identification process, which is that best versus best? We have a HAL academy system from 13s through to first grade, NPL academy first grade, which again is another version of that. We have the FFA programs sitting within the school environments that are doing X, Y, and Z, running their programs independently from NPL, from TSP, from the HAL clubs, doing beat sessions midweek and all sorts of things. So the whole mix, I guess this is why you get the big bucks, mate. But the whole mix is all over the place.
I agree.
And for us as NPL clubs, we now have the other option, which is these star academies sitting above us to actually then rank the clubs, which will then be another version of players migrating to different clubs within that environment. So, you know, how do you eat that elephant in the room, and what do we say to our members, and how do we go forward?
Well, firstly, it's an opt-in system, so why wouldn't every NPL club go, yeah, well, we're in. We'll go for that. The only reason that would be is, well, we're afraid we wouldn't get there. Or we don't actually operate at that level, so that's what we need to know. That's the first thing you need to know is who is and who isn't. It's a simple one. Then if you look at it, then everything else becomes almost secondary. So if we get this right, if club development becomes right, you don't need to do any player development. You don't need TSP because it's happening in the clubs. But at this time, whilst we're developing this, you do need a safety net. So TSP is valid. One contact maybe as a top-up during the regular season, maybe more contacts. And it's certainly valid in the regional areas because you won't have one club that dominates potentially. Although you might in Wodonga with Murray or someone like that, you might. In which case, the problem there is if all those kids play in the local league, it devastates local football. So you've got to work out the right mechanism in the regional areas. But in essence, if you then look at it and you go, let's just say all the 80 clubs are 2-star and Manly United are 2-star, then why would I go to Sydney? I'm getting the same benefit here. I know now. I might go because it moves me closer to the pro football and they get to know me. But if it's definitely a 3-star or a 4-star, it becomes less of a decision. It's being defined as a better environment because the staff are more committed to it. The interesting thing, so it is a terrible mess in my opinion. There are some good elements going on. They're bound to be. We just don't know, and we don't know how they fit together. So this is one mechanism to go, well, at least people can put their hand up and go, I'll get into this one. If you choose not to, that's fine. But we won't know. We're not going to come and look and say, oh, we wanted to see whether ours should be one of them. No, apply. Put your money where you back yourself.
Well, just a question, you touched on the TSP. From your opinion, there's two components to the TSP, and I think we all agree that as a concept it is good and it's necessary. There's the training component to it and the elite gaming component to it. Do you think you need both, or what's better?
I think there's both in a way. I think that there's a top-up in training. I think that, but I do think the elite games give something. There's a real evidence that suggests the intensity is higher. There's evidence that that it's a challenge for both. So I think the intense games, they lie outside the competition structure, is not a bad thing. They are a major factor, and we talked yesterday about making sure they happen across every state. The idea being that periodically you might invite a Tasmania to Victoria to join your games, because it's very difficult in some states to get something regular and meaningful just on the numbers. And then the idea of maybe having, which I know have already happened, you've hosted tournaments and included HAL clubs and TSP, but then you'd build that around the star system as well. So that would be the plus, that would be the high level competition. And games where actually you don't have to do much. Team sits off, for instance, and they're trying to win the game. And actually in that game you get no intensity. You'll all be in that space. The reality is the intensity comes in training because your players are similarly leveled, aren't they? So you have run at high intensity, but it happens in training, not necessarily in games. Where we can do it in games is where we get those accumulated groups together. And those regularly, so fortnightly, maybe once a month, whatever, another 15 to 20 games of that a season would be a big factor.
Does that mean we'll see TSB coming into the women's program as well? Because at the moment, we only have those regional hubs when it comes to state titles, and that happens once a year in September.
Yeah, I would like to think so, yeah. And again, that might be where, if you look at the movement into the academy space, that actually if a club want to move into that space, that becomes a de facto TSP. And they should be included in the program. So it might be the catalyst to actually encourage some of the clubs to embrace putting in a development program for girls. And I wouldn't say it's labeled a TSP, but in essence, if a club's doing it well, maybe they should be party to that. So not just a state-run entity.
Can I just ask the question on that, the star stuff too? Like as a club, if we apply to be a one-star or a two-star, if we decide to work, which 100% we will, am I applying to the Manly United men's program?
You would apply for two.
Women's program, or just together? Or?
No, two.
So that'd be separate?
Yeah, so you can apply for girls only and get a recognition.
Yeah.
You can apply for both or boys only. So you don't have to run both because not many clubs are in that space. But we would like to get a benchmark across those who are providing the girls space.
Rob, John, I'm from Sutherland. What's your thoughts on all the private operators that are private academies, if you like, that are out there in the marketplace?
Well, in every
in our society, there's many parents who might have a kid going to even a top level academy,
yeah.
and they're still going to take them and push them and take them somewhere else for extra training.
My personal opinion
Where do
is
you go with that?
the private market tells you where we're failing. Yeah, they're filling the gaps. They're filling the gaps in social football, leisure leagues, stuff of that nature. They're filling the gaps in player development. We get it right. There'll always be, you can earn more that way, by the way. But for me, they should be outside the system. Yes? Go on.
When you talk about player development and you don't have quite a clear player pathway at the moment, especially when it gets close to that senior level. I know the National Youth League has changed over the years, and there's a system that I think produced a lot of players that now play nationally or local. How do we understand resources as part of it? What's your solution to get those players in that 16 to 18-year-old bracket, get them as close as possible to becoming potential soccer groups, and how do we help them to be playing at a men's level, to make that jump? Because I think it's quite hard at the moment not producing as many players to play at the highest level as a senior.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's the 17 to 23 bracket. So the 20 rule is a disaster. Having 3 20-year-olds on your roster, disaster. It should be under 23. So what happens is I have to sign 3 under 20. Now it's 21. Have to sign them. If they're not ready at 21, and I can't actually, can't meaningfully contribute, you have to get rid of them. I have to get another 20. So instead of being able to keep someone and migrate them in, and there are stories of players who've then left, gone overseas, and done all right and come back, simply because we have a cut-off point. So that's changed this year in the regs. It's 21. It should move to 23. Actually, to move into mastery takes longer. The other thing is they need to play, and they need to play regularly. So a revision or a review of the MYL, put in something in that space which is longer and meaningful, is something that should be a priority, should be an immediate thing. There are loads of models. There's the second tier discussion. I won't go into them because we don't know where we are with that. But in essence, there could be a golden ticket to do something in that space, which would help both clubs progress and our top players, potential top players progress.
Sorry, I just ask, I think no one would question us going to
aid to the AFC at a senior level has been much more beneficial for the soccer in terms of quality competition and preparation. But on the flip side, with our youth teams, the young teams, not qualifying here, and obviously New Zealand probably taking our place there, do you see that has had insignificant in terms of potentially sort of preparing our players, or is it you don't think it's a big thing for not qualifying? Because it is tough. It is quite tough for our young teams to make it at the World Cup 17s under 20 because of the resources we're up against and some of the Asian countries that understand.
It's a balancing act, I suppose. So you go and play teams that you beat 13, 14-0, end up in the World Cup. Has it prepared you for the World Cup? Don't know. New Zealand did okay in the 20s one, to be fair. Didn't wallop the group in that particular thing in the Oceania. My own feeling is that the benchmark is where Asia's a decent benchmark. More players from the Asian Confederation and the African Confederation are getting into top football. So someone like Mo Salah. I mean, who would have thought that an Egyptian player, it would have been unheard of at one point. Now there's some top players coming out of those countries. It's the benchmark that we need to prove that we're competing with. And I think the danger looking at the New Zealand one is you look at the outliers and go, that must be good then. That's the big danger. You'll always get an outlier. There'll be someone in Australia now, somewhere, girl and boy, who's the outlier, who the world will go, thank you, we'll have him. It's not because it's in spite. What you want is lots of them, and they're not outliers. So for me, you're competing in the right confederation. You need to compete. We need to be better.
There was one message that you want everyone to take away in terms of the request to do differently tomorrow than they did today. What would that message be?
The message would be 2 letters, W and E. We. That's it. Not you, us, them. We. We can all get better at every level. And if we do it together and help each other and support each other, we have a much better chance. We need to get rid of the barriers. And in some respects, we are the barriers.